Dr. Dwyer, thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me for the Society for Nutrition, Education, and Behavior, which was formerly the Society for Nutrition Education. You're one of the 3 original leaders that we have selected to be interviewed at this time. This interview is particularly relevant because you, Dr. Dwyer, were there when SNE was formed. So in essence, you are a witness to our organization's history. You've also had an outstanding career, which I will now briefly summarize. You're a professor of nutrition and community health at the Tufts University School of Medicine. You're adjunct professor of nutrition at the Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Senior nutrition scientist at the Office of Dietary Supplements, Office of the Director of the National Institute of Health. You've also been the author or co-author of more than 350 research and 400 review articles and 4 books. You're the past president of both the Society for Nutrition Education and the American Society for Nutrition, of which you're also a fellow. In 2022, you were ranked by Research.com as one of the best female scientists in the U.S. and the world. Dr. Dwyer, welcome. One of the first questions is, why did you join SNE?
It actually all started with my involvement in the White House Conference on Food, Nutrition, and Health, but the one in 1969. Jean Dwyer was the director of that, and he was also my thesis advisor. So I came down here to Washington to be on the staff. And the staff of the White House Conference involved getting together all the different interest groups in nutrition and trying to do something about hunger. And there were many, many different interest groups. The scientists were there, the academics, but also the trade associations, the Dairy Council, all of the food industry, government, and religious groups. And we weren't very good at talking to each other. The translation gap was clearly there. And I think many of us realized then that there really needed to be more emphasis on nutrition education. And so the next year, I learned about the Journal of Nutrition Education, because that had started, I think, in 1968. So I was looking for places to publish some of my own work, and I had met George Briggs and some of the other people who were active in starting the journal, and I ended up finding out that they were going to make it a society, which they did. And as soon as they did, I realized I had to join, and I did join. It was very useful to make it a society because it was a society that gave a professional home to nutrition educators who really had been sort of out of the woods. Nobody really had a home for them.
There was such a great need for it, so it's good to know a little
absolutely.
bit. Yeah, it makes sense now.
Yeah, in retrospect.
Yes, it does. You've been in your profession for over 50 years. Tell me how SNEB has had an impact on your leadership roles as a nutrition educator.
This is a copy of the Journal of Nutrition Education back in the early 70s, and the cover is an article on reaching Chinese American children with nutrition education. And the first author was Mabel Wong, who was one of our students at Tufts, and I was the second author. It's a really good article. She wrote a terrific job. So my own research is the first thing. The second thing is that SNE really inspired me, I think, to try to translate nutrition science to other audiences as well as students. That got me involved in a syndicated newspaper column that Dr. Dwyer was the first author, called Food for Thought. But I wrote the columns with him for about 5 years. The other ways that influenced my career was it got me very much interested in public policy and government policy. And as a result of that, I worked on President Carter's reorganization project, where we were trying to bring different sectors involved in nutrition together more. It got me very much interested in Congress. And I worked as a congressional fellow for a year on Capitol Hill for a Democrat and a Republican, being involved in making legislation that really emphasize nutrition was very important.
Also, you always have been known kind of being a trailblazer and having papers out there that some people would not touch, so to speak. This led you, I believe, to becoming the editor of Nutrition Today.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yes,
I brought a copy
yes,
of that.
yes,
Yeah, I got
yes.
this.
30
I got
years, I think you've been an editor.
a long time.
Yeah.
The first editor was Helen Guthrie.
Yes,
Who was also
yes.
a president of SNE.
Yeah.
And Audrey Moretsky. Audrey was the editor of the Journal of Nutrition Education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. But some of the topics that you've published.
We try to get at things other people wouldn't
I know.
cover. And one is history of
Yeah.
food and nutrition. Another is ethnic cuisines, because I work in Chinatown, so I'm very much interested in that. When you get into the deep science,
Uh-huh.
I'm a member of the National Academy of Medicine,
Yes.
and I served on their council. And when I was on the council, the National Academy Press publishes all the big books, the dietary reference intakes and many other very good studies. But in those days, in the early 2000s, they really didn't disseminate their work very well. And the volumes were very expensive, so not too many people read them. And they were very dry. And there were a group of us on the council and later elsewhere urging the press to do more in terms of translational things to make the information more meaningful to the average person. And they did that. They did that, and they went far beyond that, and now you can get the whole volumes for free on the internet. So SNE did a lot for me in terms of my own career, and I think it does it for many other people
Yes,
too.
absolutely. What makes SNEB unique among other organizations in our field?
Well, I think it's a very friendly place. It's very, very collaborative, and I think that's important. I think the other thing is the mission, and the mission is nutrition education, but also policy, practice, and research, and those are all very important. All of those elements are very important. And I think it's the only group that really focuses on those specifically.
They also pay special attention to the underserved and marginalized.
They sure do, and that's gone back, that's sort of in the DNA, I think, of
I think it is,
SNEB.
yeah.
Because it started back in the at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The first articles were on the hunger and malnutrition
Right.
of vulnerable groups. So that's to their credit. The template that they've developed over the years for nutrition education competencies, again, is important. It's important for the U.S., but it's a template that one can use in other countries as well. And I think that's been a very, very important step forward.
First, when SNEB was formed, it really didn't count in most universities.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you know, the thing is, back in the early 60s and 70s, there were some places where it counted. But basically, the average university really didn't have a place for nutrition education as a discipline. And I think that's changed. In most of the big departments of nutrition now, it's a recognized discipline. People are proud to publish their research in the journal. That's very important.
Now, we've talked about how SNEB has changed. What needs to continue?
The hybrid, I think we've learned a lot about hybrid. The hybrid would be useful, or elements of the meeting that would be hybrid, would be useful for people who can't get away, can't afford it, whatever, but still get to them. And it also gives you the opportunity to reach out abroad to many countries where you never could go before. So that's one thing that I think is extremely important to go forward with. The other, of course, is to continue to emphasize the fundamental mission of nutrition education, but also policy, practice, and research. Mm-hmm. And I think we have every reason to suspect from the program for this meeting that that's going to happen.
That really was on the visionaries' mind when they first came to the
Absolutely,
table.
yeah. Well, you think about the beginning of the society, it was really a small group in California. It started in the Department of Nutrition and the Cooperative Extension people, but quickly Helen Walsh, who was a public health nutritionist, joined forces with those folks, And also there were people in Dairy Council and the various commodity groups in California who all became interested as well. And then it jumped out of California and across the country to many different places, including Boston, where my colleague John Dwyer became very much interested, and I think he was one of the presidents. In the first 5 or 10 years, it was very interdisciplinary, and there were a lot of different groups involved. School lunch and breakfast first, and then later some of the other programs, Head Start and so forth, came in. SNAP changed its name and became SNAP, and then it became very much involved too. So it's been very diverse, and I hope it continues to be that way.
Well, the next question that would logical follow is, well, in today's world, what may need to change?
In the early years, we were able to get a lot done because it was so diverse. SNEB continues to be enormously diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, not so much in gender, but it's become international as well. So it's all good there. It tends to be more heavily weighted toward academics and cooperative extension, the big food programs, than it is all of the other people involved in nutrition in society. And if you really want to make a change, all of the groups have to be represented. And in the early days, it was possible to do that in part because of some of those other people. I pulled this out of the collection I have.
Your
of old
collection,
journals.
yes.
Yeah. And this is the Journal of Nutrition Education for the National Conference on Nutrition Education back in 1979. And the sponsors were the Society for Nutrition Education, now SNEB, but also U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, then USHEW, the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the Office of the President, the Federal Trade Commission as well. Now, how did this happen? It had happened mainly because of Esther Peterson and other people in the government who were very much interested in nutrition education and who were involved. Esther was first involved as vice president of Giant Foods here in Washington.
Right.
Between the Department of Labor where she worked, and she really helped to make this happen. So I think having all of those groups, private sector, voluntary sector, more of those people, in addition to all of the wonderful people we've got, would make an even more effective way to address some of these issues of the 21st century.
So what are you saying? Are you saying we should have another national conference on nutrition education and maybe go global?
I think it's about time. I think it's about time. This was 1979, and that was a long time ago now.
So is that your call for action?
That's my call for action. SNE, I think SNEB has 5 memos of understanding already with international groups.
Right.
That's terrific. But there are a lot more than 5 countries. And so you've got things that can be used worldwide with adaptations. And so it seems to me that that's a way of expanding outward. The other way I'd love to see expanding is more work with other professional societies, including the other societies that are very much concerned about nutrition, even though they don't have education in their name. And that would be the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the American Society for Nutrition, the Institute of Food Technology, the School Food Service Association, among others. And also the chefs, the Institute of Wine and Food. So there are lots of different groups that I think could benefit from joint meetings, perhaps, meeting together, or maybe you have a caboose meeting that focuses on nutrition ed in the particular field that the larger meeting is.
You know, in terms of thinking about this diversity, this really is having all members of the food system in place. And that's compatible, I think, with the 2022 White House Conference.
Yes, there was a conference here six months ago or so. And one of the calls for action there was trying to get everybody involved in the food system at the table together to try to improve the health and nutritional value and enjoyment, I hope, too, of the food supply.
Do you think this trend of really the interdependence of people around the world and the global community is continuing to develop in many fields, and particularly in the field of education, but here in nutrition. Talk a little bit about that there's still plenty of countries that we could actually touch base
well,
with.
I think we learned that certainly, if you think of the dietary reference intakes now, they're North America. Well, they're at least English-speaking North American dietary reference intakes. We work so closely with Canada that there's only one thing put out, and it strikes me that Western Hemisphere is still virgin territory with respect to nutrition education. There is a language barrier when you go south of the border, but that can be overcome. And I think that's fertile territory for going further. And then there are all of the other countries. There's Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, the European Union, which I learned a great deal from. There are wonderful projects going on over there. So the world is your oyster if you're a nutrition educator. And you can learn a lot from these other groups.
And as you mentioned, the competencies that are continuing to be updated and developed as a way.
They're exportable. And then adaptable.
Yes.
Nation to nation.
I'd like for you to give us some words of wisdom that we can pass on to current and future nutrition educators.
The first thing I think is the science. We have to stay true to the science. And it's difficult because the science is constantly changing. It's also an academic discipline, but it's far more than an academic discipline. Nutrition education is also about choices and about solutions. And when you get into that, you realize very quickly that my way or the highway, nutritional nanny, I know best, is never going to work. It never did work. Of course we'll disagree with them, but we need to learn to disagree without becoming disagreeable. There is no perfect way of eating. There is no perfect, morally justified higher level of eating than others. Eating is for enjoyment first, and then for health, perhaps. But we have to remember that small steps in the right direction with respect to the health aspects are what we want to make. And people have other priorities as well, and we need to recognize what those priorities are. So we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Some steps in the right direction are better than no steps at all. Nutrition is only part of the solution to most of the problems, even the nutrition problems that we face in the world today. So we have to learn to collaborate effectively and understand what's going on with other disciplines. That doesn't mean that we have to join another society or anything else. It means that we have to learn to dialogue with these other groups. Certainly we need to know how to work together better. But maybe it's time for another national conference on nutrition education with the Society for Nutrition Education and Behavior leading the way. But as you remember, in this conference, it was 4 or 5 other sponsors as well. And I think it's going to have to be across the board again.
I can't help but think that this is basically impacting them for tomorrow in the terms that they will potentially have a healthier lifestyle. So this is reminiscent of the poet's words, "Faces he hath not seen shall bless him," which can certainly be said of you because of what you have put into play to so many current generations. And we are grateful, and we thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.